This guy named Robert works as a normal man in his daily world, but he is far from it. He can fight the most dangerous people to stand for the righteousness. Today, we are going to discuss 2014 thriller movie, The Equalizer. Without further ado, let's dive in. It's early in a morning. Robert McCall readies himself for work at Home Mart. He's well liked and respected by his co-workers. During lunch, he joins his friend Ralphie. Ralphie takes a bite of his sandwich and McCall hears a surprising crunch. It turns out there are chips inside the sandwich. McCall reminds Ralphie that he needs to shed some weight for his security guard test. Most nights, McCall heads to a diner with a book in hand. He's engrossed in The Old Man and the Sea. A young girl at the diner inquires whether the man in the book has caught the fish. McCall replies that he hasn't caught it yet. After finishing her pie, the girl steps out to flag down a taxi. McCall's co-workers inquire about his past before working with them. In jest, he claims he used to be a backup dancer for Gladys Knight when she was with the Pips. Later that night, at the same diner, McCall encounters the same girl. She notices he's now reading a different book. A limousine arrives across the street from the diner. The girl receives a call from her pimp, Slavy, who informs her that she has a client waiting in the limo. She's reluctant because this particular man is unpleasant. However, she goes outside reluctantly to meet him and finds an overweight man inside the car. On the following evening, McCall encounters the girl from the diner again. She bears a painful bruise on her face. McCall offers her a donut he brought from work. She joins him at his table and introduces herself as Thierry, though her real name is Alina. She hands McCall a CD with her singing. McCall walks with her until a car pulls up beside them. It's Slavy and his driver TV. Slavy exits the car and strikes Alina. McCall takes a step forward, but notices TV holding a gun. Slavy approaches McCall and gives him a card, inviting him to consider his business for other girls. Al revisits the diner another night and learns from the manager that Alina is in the ICU after a severe beating. McCall goes to the hospital and finds another woman, Mandy, at Alina's bedside. Mandy's face appears even more battered and bruised. She walks past McCall, tears streaming down her face, and clumsily pours herself a cup of coffee, causing it to overflow. McCall comforts her and inquires about Alina. They ride the elevator and Mandy reveals that Slavy assaulted Alina, and she fought back, becoming an example of his brutality. Mandy discloses that Slavy once threw battery acid in a girl's face to set an example. He's used threats against other girls as well. So McCall studies the card Slavy gave him, then heads to a spot above a restaurant where Slavy and his crew are gathered. He walks in with an envelope containing $9,800, hoping to secure Alina's release. Initially, the thugs mock McCall, but Slavy considers the money enough to keep Alina for a month. McCall retrieves the cash and starts to leave. However, he has a change of heart, locks the door, and carefully assesses the men and their weapons. He sets a timer on his watch. One of the men points a gun at McCall, but he seizes the man's arm, causing him to accidentally shoot Slavy in the throat. McCall uses a shot glass to injure another man's eye, stabs a third, and finally dispatches TV by repeatedly using a corkscrew, ultimately thrusting it under his chin to finish him off. McCall then watches Slavy slowly die. After these killings, a Russian mobster named Teddy arrives in Boston to track down the murderer. He teams up with a group of corrupt cops to gather information. Back at work, McCall notices that Ralphie is absent. He learns that Ralphie has quit. McCall pays a visit to a restaurant where Ralphie's mother is employed. Ralphie is assisting there due to a fire that supposedly broke out accidentally. One of the corrupt cops, Frank Masters, takes Teddy to a gangster named John Looney's place to continue the hunt for the killer. John insults Teddy and all Russians in general. In response, Teddy strikes John with an ashtray while Frank eliminates John's henchmen. Teddy continues to pummel John until he loses consciousness. McCall enjoys a baseball game with his co-workers, and to everyone's surprise, Ralphie arrives in a security guard uniform, signifying that he has passed his test. Meanwhile, the two corrupt cops, Remar and Peterson, dine at Ralphie's mother's restaurant. They forcibly demand money from her, threatening another accident if the payment is late again. McCall finds them outside the restaurant and expresses his intention to report a crime. Initially, they dismiss him, but their attitude changes when he calls one of them personally. McCall reveals a video he recorded of them extorting a convenience store clerk, complete with their confession to starting the restaurant fire. McCall gives them an ultimatum: return the money or face the video going public. Despite being held at gunpoint, McCall swiftly defeats both cops. They comply and later return the extorted money to Ralphie's mother. At Home Mart, a criminal holds cashier Jenny at gunpoint, demanding the cash from the register. McCall calmly steps in and hands over the money. The criminal also insists on taking Jenny's ring, a precious heirloom. Tearfully, she gives it to him. Fuqua discreetly observes the man's tattoos, cap, and other details, but refrains from taking action as children enter the store with their mother. Instead, McCall tails the criminal outside and notes the license plate on his car. McCall informs the police that this robbery is part of a series committed by the same man. The next day, Jenny finds her ring unexpectedly returned in the cash register. McCall discreetly places the sledgehammer he had taken from a rack back in its place after cleaning it. Teddy gathers some intel on McCall, but everything seems clean, and there's no sign of his involvement in Slavi's death. With Frank and another villain, they stake out a diner while one of their crew tries to corner McCall. McCall senses trouble and asks the lurking man if he's expecting someone else. The man draws a gun and advances. A truck pulls up, blocking Teddy and his team's view. McCall uses his book to strike the man in the stomach, then swiftly kills him by smashing his head onto the table and breaking his neck. He plunges a knife into an outlet, plunging the diner into darkness, and departs while snapping photos of Teddy and his gang in their car. Gangsters tail McCall back to his place. He boils honey to treat a wound he received during the shootout. He escapes before Teddy and his thugs arrive. From a hidden room, McCall watches them through cameras scattered around his apartment. Teddy senses he's being observed. McCall seeks refuge at his friend's house, Brian and Susan Plummer. Susan can dig up information on Teddy and his associates. While Susan retrieves the requested data, Brian reveals that people believed McCall was dead, but Susan knew the truth. When she returns, Susan discloses that the men McCall eliminated were part of the Russian mafia under Vladimir Pushkin's leadership. Teddy, whose real name is Nikolai, is Pushkin's enforcer for dirty jobs. Remar and Pedersen, once on Pushkin's payroll, were discovered dead a few days earlier. Their gruesome fate involving their testicles being forced down their throats. Susan warns McCall that these men won't cease until he and everyone close to him are eliminated. McCall locates Frank and confines him in his car, intending to expose him to lethal carbon monoxide unless he cooperates. Eventually, Frank yields and assists McCall. He directs McCall to a warehouse where the Russian criminals stash their money. McCall successfully persuades all the gangsters to surrender and secures them in a room with the money for the police to discover, subsequently freeing the workers. The authorities arrive, apprehend the gangsters, and arrest Frank. McCall then accesses Frank's safety deposit box, retrieving his money, passport, and a USB drive containing additional information about Pushkin and his illicit activities. He also locates Pushkin's oil tankers and detonates them. Meanwhile, Teddy and his crew take control of Home Mart and hold McCall's friends, including Ralphie and Jenny, hostage, coercing McCall to confront them. They trace his cell phone to anticipate his arrival. However, when McCall fails to appear, they nearly execute one of McCall's co-workers. Unexpectedly, music begins playing over the intercom, distracting the gangsters. McCall stealthily eliminates them one by one. He employs barbed wire to hang one, stabs another through the neck, and dispatches another by triggering an explosion using hydrogen in a microwave. Ralphie joins McCall's efforts until he is shot in the leg. McCall helps him escape just as an explosion activates the sprinklers. McCall acquires a nail gun and repeatedly shoots Teddy with it until a nail strikes his throat, ultimately killing him. 3 days later, McCall tracks Pushkin to his Moscow residence. Catching him off guard as Pushkin showers, McCall begins flickering the lights and running the sink water. Pushkin, bewildered, investigates the sink area, only to discover McCall has vanished. Pushkin summons his guards in panic, unaware that McCall has tampered with the exposed wires. When the water comes into contact with the wires, Pushkin is electrocuted. Unbeknownst to Pushkin, McCall had already neutralized the other guards. McCall returns to Boston, where he encounters Alina, now free from bruises. She informs him that she has secured a legitimate job and has taken up reading. Grateful for McCall's intervention, she expresses her thanks with a kiss on his cheek before they part ways. The final scene finds McCall at the diner, engrossed in his laptop. A message seeking assistance appears, and McCall responds concisely, "Yes. As always, we want to hear from you, so be sure to share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss any video.